guys, and welcome to episode 171 of the OCDstories.com podcast. Now, in this episode, I interview Mark-Ameen Johnson, and he's kindly come on the show to share his OCD story. We go into detail into that. We talk about CBT, scrupulosity, his advocacy in sexual orientation OCD, and the fact that OCD is OCD. He offers his words of hope, and there's many, many more topics covered. It was an interesting conversation with Mark, and I really hope you enjoy it. And if this podcast has helped you anyway, please leave a review wherever you listen to the show, as it helps me reach more people. As always, thanks a lot. And without further ado, here is Mark. On the podcast today, I have Mark-Ameen Johnson. Mark has kindly agreed to share his OCD story with us. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much.
No, it's good to have you on. And as you know, I get people to share their OCD story initially, and you can go into that in as little or as much detail as you want.
I'm delighted to. Well, it started out when I was just a kid, and I had all of these strange fears. For example, in junior high school, we had a textbook in which there were pictures of Egyptian mummies that had been unwrapped. And I had this fear that the mummies were going to come out of the book and kill me. So every night I would pray, please, God, don't let the mummies come out of the book. And when I say pray, my prayers were very, very ritualized. I would go on for half an hour or 45 minutes, and a lot of it was just repetition. Then one day in junior high school, somebody said there was some button that could be pressed and would destroy the world. And that was my first OCD issue, where I just became completely panicked and was depressed for days until my mother asked what was wrong. And then she said, there's no such button. Boom, instant reassurance. And that was it. I never had that fear again. A lot of things continued like that throughout my life. And I got it really, really bad when I was 16 and in high school. And I had it on and off, on and off. Couldn't really understand what was happening. I didn't know what OCD was. It was just a matter of having these episodes, for lack of a better term, where I would be anxious and depressed for weeks, and then I would find something that would take it away, and it would stay away. And that continued for a while until I started having a lot of fears about natural disasters, and at the same time scrupulosity, because I was breaking away from my religion. And nothing would take that away. So I went to a therapist who actually turned out to be a very bad therapist, but that's another story. And he refused to give me my diagnosis. So I had to call my medical company and insist they tell me, what is my diagnosis? And they said obsessive compulsive disorder. I wrote that down. I even misspelled the word obsessive. I had no idea what it was. This was in the days before the internet, so I had to look in a lot of books in the library. And I was stunned to find out, hey, this is what's been happening to me.
Yeah, when you kind of read through those books, what was the kind of feelings? What was going on for you at that time?
I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
That was the thought. Now, my issues aren't just OCD. There are so many issues. Like a lot of people with scrupulosity, I joined a religious cult, and that was the Worldwide Church of God, Herbert W. Armstrong. And that came right after my having grown up in a very conservative religious environment. There was a whole issue with my sexual orientation as well. I was in denial about being gay, and I tried to find any way to convince myself that, no, I'm not. My own background, I'm half Arabic, a quarter Italian, and so I said, oh, well, I'm Mediterranean, and, these Mediterranean guys are very touchy-feely, and they always put their arms around each other, so, yeah, that's what I like. And then I have some odd learning disabilities also. If you ask me what is my right side, what is my left side, I have to really think about it and imagine myself writing, and, okay, I would write with this hand, this must be right. North, south, east, west, really difficult for me. No one should ever follow street directions. My friend from France once said it best. If I had followed your directions, I would have ended up in the water. So yeah, all of that going on.
Mm.
But OCD was the primary issue.
Yeah.
And it was such a relief to have a term, and then it was such a relief to leave this idiot therapist and get a really good therapist who knew what she was doing.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear you finally got a decent therapist. I'm curious to know why, or at least what you think, if you don't know exactly why the therapist or doctor originally refused to give you their diagnosis.
Well, I've talked to people about this, and this is a style of therapy that he practiced. He would never give direct answers. Everything was a question. Why do you think that I don't know what I'm talking about? And I would bring him things to read. At the time, I didn't know OCD. I thought my primary issue was having left a cult. So I would read him things about people who left the cult and things therapists should not do that he was doing. And he would say, why do you think that person who wrote it knows more than I do?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a problem. He was just inappropriate. And I've learned so much since then. One of the things I want to talk about today is my volunteer work through the International OCD Foundation. But they have a wonderful page called Find the Right Therapist.
Yeah.
And if I had known that then, I never would have seen this guy. And if anybody wants to find that page, all you have to do is Google IOCDF plus Find the Right Therapist. And I want to emphasize find the right therapist, not a therapist, because they also have a wonderful service where they can help you find a therapist in your area. The main page, by the way, ocfoundation.org. And if you just want a general definition for OCD, you can Google that. IOCDF plus OCD. What is OCD? I just did that recently, emailing a friend of my sister's who asked me, well, what is OCD? What is this that you have?
Yeah, it's an important distinction that, there is a particular type of therapy for OCD, and people that listen to my podcast regularly will be very familiar with CBT and ERP. But those for listening for the first time, it's very much an important distinction. So that's a good resource on the ISDF. I'm glad you kind of finally found the right therapist. So before we kind of go into some of your advocacy, it'd be good to unpack your story a bit more.
Sure.
So when you finally found that right therapist, what type of therapy was it? How did it work for you, etc.?
Well, fortunately, she was familiar with CBT, but she was actually part of what was called the cult clinic, because I still thought that having left a cult and having all these issues was really important. And one of the things that she told me was a lot of people with scrupulosity join extremist religions, join cults. There's a disproportionate number of people who do that. She helped me to start talking about some of my fears. She helped me to start understanding where it was coming from. And she explained to me how my brain functions. We started with exposures, and it was amazing. The sad thing was eventually she had to leave because she had to take another job in California, and I had to seek someone else. But she was the best.
Yeah.
Her name was Rachel.
Cool.
Shout out to Rachel. Don't know where she is or if she'll ever even hear this podcast or if she'll even remember me. But just in case, hey, Rachel in California, you're wonderful.
Well, good shout out. And I'm glad it worked. And it's odd because, I mean, obviously I've interviewed many people on the show and read in the forums and stuff, and I've never heard people with scrupulosity then going to say join a cult. But that being said, it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that when obviously OCD is that severe, it can drive you to do all kinds of things to test or to lower anxiety or to try and, prove things right or wrong.
Exactly.
Cool. So you did CBT and ERP. Was there anything else you did around that time to kind of go alongside therapy to help get better, whether that like lifestyle changes, whether that's like mindfulness, meditation, running, exercise, anything, diet?
Things like not drinking coffee anymore because the
Mm.
caffeine would agitate me, and I still don't. Um, Beyond that, I mean, some dietary things for health. I very rarely eat red meat, for example, but I do have a weight issue. I'm a chubby guy, so I do exercise. I have my exercise bike. I use it daily. However, I don't enjoy exercise. It's something I do for health and to try to keep my weight down. People keep promising me that, yeah, the more I exercise, the endorphins are going to be released. You're going to feel great. In fact, you're going to be addicted to exercising. Well,
Mm.
I'm 53 years old and I got my treatment, back in the 1990s, when I was much younger. And no, that's never happened, but it does happen for some people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Cool. Yeah, and I mean, it's good to hear you say coffee. I'm down to 1 cup a day, and yeah, I noticed a huge drop in anxiety when I stopped it,
Yeah.
and just the ability to be able to go to sleep whenever I want, which is great. Sleep's important for mental health. Cool. So, in your couple more questions then around your
Sure.
journey is what would you say? Was there like a big epiphany moment for you in your recovery?
There have been many, some related to OCD, some related to religion, some related to disabilities, some related to, oh, that's life. The Amish have this wonderful saying, we get old too soon and smart too late. Oh boy, is that true. When I was much younger, I used to laugh at that. But then again, when I was very young, I used to think 25 is an old man.
Yeah.
Now, I'd love to be 25. That's not old. That's wonderful. 30, that in the movie Logan's Run, that's the age you have to die because you can't trust anyone over 30.
I've never seen that film, but yeah, it's like a good premise. Yeah, you're right. It's age is a perspective thing. Yeah, when you're very young, 25 is ancient. Yeah. But then I'm sure a 100-year-old would look at a 70-year-old and think they're a spring chicken. So
Oh, yes. I mean, I refer to myself as old, but my parents are in their 80s and they say, "Oh no, you're young." You
yeah,
know.
exactly. Okay, it's a similar question then. Was there a big? I guess you kind of shared one, but was there a big roadblock in your recovery, and how did you overcome it?
I guess I'm pretty stubborn. And I like to think that, oh, I don't need this. I'll just overcome this on my own.
Mm.
And that's just not how it works. And I can't tell you how many people in my volunteer work I've had to say that to. It's if you have a cold, you have actual symptoms of a cold. You can't man up, which is a sexist term, I realize, in today's
Mm.
International Women's Day, but I'm just trying to make a point. It's not that you're not strong enough. It's not that it's a divine punishment or it's bad karma. It's just something that needs to be taken care of. And you need some help in getting it under control, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. But no matter how many times I say that, uh, I'm just very, very stubborn.
Mm.
Roadblocks also things that I don't realize are OCD, and after years and years and years, I think, yeah, I think that's an OCD issue. How about that?
Mm.
Um, that would be, I guess, the biggest roadblock.
Yeah, it can be sneaky. Okay, so thanks for that and for sharing your story. Yeah, it'd be good to hear about your kind of advocacy work within the realm of OCD then.
Okay, well, I work primarily with HOCD, which is homosexual OCD. And for those unfamiliar with it, it doesn't mean a lot of gay people with OCD. It's a very controversial issue. It's people whose OCD manifests as false sexual orientation fears. Let me explain first how I got into that. Years ago, well, what year was this? This would have been, yeah, 2004. I was looking on the internet, maybe for some sort of group with gay people who had OCD. And I got a few hits, and I went to a board called Brain Physics, and I started reading what people were writing. And I said, they're not gay. What's going on here? And then it took me about 20 minutes, and then I realized that's their OCD. That's their false fears. Those are their obsessions, and then they're checking and checking and checking. So I just joined the board, posted a message, saying, well, I'm gay and I've read everything you've written, and I don't think any of you are gay, and here is why. And the next day I had 12 private messages.
Hmm.
And it was shocking to me. So I started writing to them. I really didn't know what to say or do, and I'm afraid I indulged in a lot of reinsurance because people were just asking questions. Some of them would send me photos, and they thought maybe I could divine their sexual orientation just looking at their photos. But it was a lot of OCD stuff like, well, I really don't like guys, but I think one day I will like guys, and in my mind, I think about kissing guys all the time, but I don't want to kiss a guy. And I've always liked women, but I think one day suddenly I will turn gay and blah, 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 blah. So I did a lot of research, and then in conjunction with the therapist who was in charge of that board, I wrote an article called I'm Gay and You're Not. And that was 2005. She put it on the board, and suddenly people started contacting me. And I had to say, I'm not a therapist. I can't diagnose. I can't treat, but I can tell you about my OCD. I can tell you about what it means to be gay and what it doesn't mean to be gay. And then there was another therapist. Her name is Dr. Lisa Levine. She works at the Behavioral Therapy Center of Greater Washington. She contacted me and wanted to use parts of my article and other things at a convention that she was going to for behavior therapy. And I said, great, why not? And eventually she invited me to go to Silver Spring, Maryland, where the center is, and give a talk to all the therapists who work there. Now, that was true behavior therapy for me because despite everything I do, I still have an OCD fear of therapists. And there I was in the room with a million therapists looking at me, and I'm the only non-therapist there, and I don't have any background in the study of psychology. I teach English as a second language at New York University and the College of Staten Island. I sometimes also teach English to native speakers, but that ain't psychology. Yeah, but that's what I did. I have since written other articles, and now I volunteer for the International OCD Foundation. I write a blog for the New York chapter. That's under the care of Dr. Soni Kemlani, who is an absolute sweetheart. Shout out to her. And her boss is Dr. Nez. I have no idea how to pronounce her name. I'm going to try. It looks like Fugen Neziroglu. It's Turkish. But that's with the Biobehavioral Institute in Great Neck, which is a little bit of a distance from New York City. In doing all this volunteer work and talking to a lot of therapists, I've learned a lot, and I've been able to steer people to the right sort of therapy. Often, I'm the first openly gay person a lot of these people have ever talked to or written to. And a lot of their OCD fears, while definitely being OCD, come from they're having a lot of stereotypes about gays and what gays are. And the questions I've been asked, unbelievable. I mean, for example, one guy was talking about sitting on the toilet in a public restroom, and he heard two guys talking, and then he looked down and saw he had a little pre-ejaculate, and he thought, oh my God, I must be gay. No, that has nothing to do with it. One guy got a compliment that he looked good in a pink shirt, and then he's, oh my God, I must be gay. Just things like that. It's been an amazing journey. I often joke that in my last life, I must have been an incredible homophobe because this is karma getting back at me. What gay man spends his time talking to many, many, many straight guys about all the things they like to do to women? Oy vey. That's become my life. Now, I want to stress here, HOCD is not just a bunch of straight guys. There are also women who get it, and there are also LGBTQ people who get it and have
Mm.
false fears that maybe their gay life is a lie and they're actually secretly straight,
Yeah.
or maybe their bisexuality is a lie and they're monosexual. And so whatever their partner is, they actually like the other sex. And there are people who are non-binary who get this as well. And there was one person I helped who was asexual and had a false fear that he was going to start having sex and enjoy it. Now, people might say, who would be afraid of enjoying sex? Well, that's OCD. And if you're not programmed for enjoying sex or desiring it, yeah, that's a real OCD issue. The problem here is that in the LGBTQ community, there is limited awareness of HOCD, and it's largely very negative. People have the misconception that CBT for HOCD is actually ex-gay therapy,
Mm.
and it's not. CBT for HOCD means accepting whatever sexual orientation there is. But for many people, you cannot determine your orientation while you have all of these terrible obsessions and fears, because OCD does not accept logic. And
Mm.
I tell people, I'm a college professor. Logic is the center of my universe, but it doesn't work with OCD. And that's why assurance doesn't work. And that's why these people have so much trouble figuring out what sexual orientation they are. Take away the OCD, and yeah, they probably know.
And also, it's worth saying, it was a good point you raised about even people who are homosexual obsessing and worrying about being straight or heterosexual.
Hmm.
And that's why sometimes it's called sexual orientation OCD now, because it's not
Yes.
just about homosexual, it's heterosexual worries as well. Because if you are naturally you're a homosexual person, and you don't want to be straight if that's who you are at your core. So it's
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And I was just going to make another point, and it just went out of my head. Oh, well, I'll try to remember it.
Yeah, no worries. If it comes up,
Sorry.
let me know. Yeah, okay. So now you're blogging on
Oh,
the.
I
Oh,
do remember.
yeah, go
I
for
do
it.
remember. Yeah. Another reason that HOCD is an unfortunate term is it's also the acronym for harm OCD.
Yes, correct.
So people do get confused. All right. So you were talking about blogging.
Well, no, I was just going to say on that note, then, yeah, as I was mentioning you before the start of this recording, you talk about in one of your articles that some therapists may not want to talk about the term homosexual OCD or HOCD, or may not even acknowledge it,
Hmm.
and that's because it's an internet term. It's used by sufferers as opposed to OCD is OCD. I had Dr. Reed Wilson on the podcast before, and he uses the term the content of your worry is trash, meaning the theme, whether it's homosexual, scrupulosity, relationship, is just what OCD is using to scare you, but underneath it all, it is the same thing.
I
So
agree.
yeah. So that's yeah.
OCD is OCD. I absolutely agree. These acronyms and these abbreviations and other terms, it's just for convenience online.
Yeah,
Um,
helps people
I,
find people.
exactly.
Mm.
And this is something that I say to a lot of people. When someone contacts me about HOCD for the first time, and I write back, I write a personal response, but in all the first timer messages, there's also something that I cut and paste with just general information.
Mm.
And one of the first things there is HOCD is an internet term. If you go to a therapist and say, I have HOCD, the therapist might not know what you're talking about, but
Mm.
the therapist will understand OCD. And what I would say is I have OCD, and I also have fears about sexual orientation. And that's the way to broach it.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, many OCD specialists will be very familiar with the terms, but some others who know how to use CBT and ERP but aren't necessarily so day-to-day involved with OCD may not be completely clued up on all of the sub themes. But yeah, as you say, they will get OCD. Okay, cool. No, that's really great to hear. And so another general question now is just kind of general words of hope for someone with OCD? Let's say they haven't fully started their journey of getting better yet.
I have to steal what people in the LGBT community say, it gets better. And even though that's meant for LGBTQ, it is so true of OCD also. One of the things with OCD is it makes you doubt things that you know to be true. It makes you believe things you know to be false. And people with OCD doubt that they have OCD even after they've been diagnosed. I get people contacting me who say, yeah, I've had 17 therapists tell me I have OCD, but I'm still not sure. So one thing you have to do, and this is hard for a person with OCD, is trust your therapist or trust what people are saying. People with HOCD come to me and say, yeah, my parents say I couldn't possibly be gay, and my girlfriend says when I'm in bed with her, she knows I'm not gay, but I don't know. Yeah, well, you have to start trusting what other people say. Don't trust what your OCD feels like. OCD uses lack of logic. As I was saying before, you can't use logic. Trust what other people say and trust the notion that so many people have recovered from HOCD and other forms of OCD, including me with the crazy forms of OCD that I've felt. There's one person in your country whose name I won't say online. I'm just going to call him Adam, but he has one of my favorite stories, and this is a story of hope. He had horrible HOCD. We actually wrote for many years, and for years and years he went on and on and on, and then he finally got therapy and he got over it. Well, his girlfriend and her friends decided that, in London, the best clubs are the gay ones. We're going to go to a gay club. He went with them, and his reaction was, this is what I was afraid of? It's nothing. In fact, it's really boring. Yeah, that kind of recovery is possible. That's the hope that I want to give people. Now, I have never had HOCD myself. I've had many other kinds, but I know people personally, some who are now friends of mine, who have recovered from this completely. Now, when I say recover completely, I don't mean OCD ever goes away completely. What I do mean is it comes less often, it's not so strong, and you have the resources to be able to deal with it. So, for example, when I'm teaching, one of my OCD issues is that I suddenly get these messages in my head, you don't know what you're talking about, Mark. You don't know this subject, and your students know you don't know it, and you're actually an idiot, and they're laughing at you behind your back. Now, I just ignore it, or I agree with it. Yeah, okay, that's true. I'm a complete idiot. I'm a moron. I don't know anything, but you know what? I have to finish teaching this class. That is possible. That is hope. I often compare OCD to the Dementors in Harry Potter. The Dementors that suck up all positive thoughts, all hope from you. The Dementors are easily defeated by people who are trained in magic. And I don't want to confuse CBT with magical thinking, because magical thinking is a bad thing in OCD. But CBT is like magic. It actually works when you know what you're doing. In Harry Potter, they have to know how to pronounce the spells correctly and how to swish the wand correctly and so on. But it does work. There's another monster in Harry Potter, and I'm probably not going to pronounce the name correctly. It's Boggart, and I've never actually learned the pronunciation of that word. I'm going to say Bogart, but like Humphrey Bogart, but I might be wrong. But that creature manifests as your worst fear. And so the way to get rid of it is to take your wand, wave your wand, think of the funniest thing you can, and say the word ridiculous. And you know what? That works with OCD.
Yeah, that's a good link out there.
Shout out to J.K. Rowling, because I have no way to prove this, but I really think she had OCD in mind for a few things in her books.
Well, yeah, she actually has OCD herself.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she.
Okay.
Well, I mean, don't anyone listening, don't 100% quote me on this, but I'm 99.9% sure, because in her book after Harry Potter, the Something Getaway, no,
Haven't read that.
Casual Vacation. It's something like that. There's a character in that with OCD, and because I tried to get on the podcast a while back, but obviously I wasn't able to.
I'm
But
sorry. That would have been wonderful.
there would have been. But yeah, from what I gather, yeah, she had it, and I believe contamination. Okay, so no, that's a good explanation. Thank you. So I asked a couple of questions towards the end, which is one, if you could pick up the phone and call your 20-year-old self, what would you tell him?
Oh, this is ironic because this is actually a question that I use in teaching ESL, and I add something to that. I say, and would your younger self follow what you said?
Mm.
So the first thing I have to say is my stubborn younger self would not listen to me at all. My younger self would say, yeah, but that's you and you're
Yeah.
old. I'm not going to be you. I'm going to be different. That being said, I would tell my younger self, things aren't always what they appear to be.
Mm.
Um, if you have feelings that feel very, very uncomfortable, don't think you're the only person in the universe who's ever felt that way. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything you feel, millions of other people throughout history and millions of people today have also felt. There is now, oh boy, I'm going into cliches, aren't I? I was going to say there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, let me stop with the cliches, but nothing is as hopeless as it may seem. As OCD people, we tend to think of everything as black and white, right and wrong, good and bad, 100% or zero. And that's the way that I thought when I was younger. My OCD told me, I will never be happy. I will never have a normal life. I will never, I will never, I will never. And that's just not true. Life is not rainbows and unicorns, but it's not all dread either. It's a mix. And there are things that you can do to improve yourself, improve your life, help yourself, but they take time. As a young person, if something didn't work in 5 minutes, I gave up on it. I just didn't understand the value of sticking with it. So, for example, as a young person, my attempts to learn foreign languages didn't work. As an older person, they do work. And it's the same thing with OCD. When I first had my diagnosis and I first started to understand it, I would get very frustrated that things wouldn't work immediately. They usually don't. Nothing in life works immediately. You just have to keep working on it and be patient. And also talk to other people. This is the main reason I do my volunteer work. I can't cure OCD. I can't make it go away, but I'm a good listener. And sometimes just talking and letting another person know really, really helps. I don't remember who the person was. I remember reading once there was a Jewish man. It may have been during World War II. It may have been during the pogroms of Russia. And he couldn't tell anybody just how angry and upset and scared he was. So he told his dog. And he had these conversations with his dog, and it just got it off his chest, and he felt so much better.
Yeah.
That says a lot. So I think this is the primary thing that I do in volunteer work is people just talk to me and I listen and I respond. And that's also had a wonderful effect on me. I never expected that helping other people would end up allowing me to help myself. And there's another cliche. When you help others, you're really helping yourself. There are a lot of times when I hit an OCD roadblock today, and I remember the advice I gave someone else, or I remember what someone else told me. And so someone who wrote to me maybe 5 years ago, and I'm not in contact with anymore, is actually helping me because of what that person said. It's an amazing thing. So reach out, talk to people. Do not be ashamed. With sexual orientation in particular, there's a lot of stigma and shame attached to that. And I should add also, there are people who've written to me about other fears like pedophile OCD. They're just so horrified even to think about it. But having that sort of OCD doesn't mean you're a pedophile. It means you have OCD. And there are people who understand that. I often have to tell people, when you go see your therapist, you're not going to shock the therapist. The therapist has already heard it all. And no matter how crazy what you tell this person is, that therapist has heard it before. And then I share some of my own crazy stories. I've already told you about the mummies. Another one was when I was in college and I first learned that more than half the vocabulary in English comes from French and from Latin, even though English is not a Latin language. I suddenly thought, oh, that means that I should be able to read French and Latin with no preparation. Now, of course, that's not logical. I knew that I couldn't do it, but that's what my OCD was telling me. So I started looking at French and Latin, and of course, I couldn't understand them. And then I thought, oh, I must have brain cancer. Oh, Lord, that's OCD. Um, yeah, I have really gotten so far away from your question. I'm embarrassed to admit I don't even remember what I was answering.
No, it's all good. I think you answered it. Okay, so next one is in New York. You have a billboard. What do you want written on that billboard for everyone to see?
Ah, boy.
Hmm.
Remember love.
Hmm.
Because people are so judgmental, not just of OCD, but of everything. And this is ironic. This is what I was just talking about to my sister's friend. Um, Accepting yourself is the beginning of the journey. Accepting others is the ongoing journey. So, for example, many of the people I've helped with OCD are deeply religious, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist. I fully accept that. It's not, our relationship is not about me trying to deconvert them and say why I'm an atheist. I have to remember love. To this person, religious beliefs are important.
Hmm.
And sometimes I get contacted by therapists, who want to talk about HOCD or other things. And a couple of therapists, I've actually taught them something because I said, there are people with OCD who have atheist fears. And those are
Hmm.
false fears like any other OCD fears. They're not real atheists like me. They're deeply religious people who falsely fear they don't believe in God. And it's not our place to try to deconvert them unless they say, I want to become an atheist. And I've had more than one therapist tell me, I didn't think of that. But that's what love means, completely accepting other people, agreeing to disagree. I mean, it's no secret that I despise Donald Trump with everything in me, and I adore Barack Obama. Yeah, I'm a liberal stereotype, I know, but I've got friends, I've got students, who voted for Donald Trump and like him.
Hmm.
Okay, well, we can still have great conversations about Star Trek. Doesn't matter who you voted for.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what love encompasses. And that's something a lot of religious people need to know also, because they can be so judgmental. Having said that, so can atheists. Atheists can be pretty judgmental, and so can LGBTQ people. We need to remember to love each other. So I guess that's the other cliche on there. Let's agree to disagree. That should also be on the bulletin board.
Yeah, no, I love that. And yeah, I mean, I'm surprised and not surprised at how many times the word love comes up to that question. I think it's really something that's on many people's minds, and rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So is there anything else you wish you could have shared that I haven't asked you?
Well, what I found really interesting was that on one of your recent podcasts, you had Dr. Stephen Phillipson.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many times I have sent a link to his article, I Think It Moved. Shout out to him because it's a fantastic article. For those with HOCD, look him up. Look up Dr. Fred Penzel, How Do I Know I'm Not Really Gay? There's part one, there's also part two. And also, read about OCD, read what therapists have written, but please don't use it for checking. Even my articles, people use them for checking, and you should not. I've had people tell me, I read your article every day for reassurance. And my response is, delete my article. Don't read it anymore, please. That's not the point. That's not what you should be doing. I know how much we want reassurance. But that's the worst thing for OCD.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can be a hypocrite because, yeah, I seek it out myself sometimes because I'm human. I err because I'm human. There's another cliche: to err is human, to forgive is divine. So be divine and forgive yourself if you err.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Use articles and videos and my podcast for education, not reassurance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good point. Cool. Well, look, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your work.
I enjoyed this a lot. Now, I am going to make a confession. Just as I still have my fear of therapists, I also suffer from social anxiety, although you'd never know it because I've done acting, I'm a teacher and all that. But even this morning when I woke up and said, oh, today's the day for the podcast, what was the first thing in my mind? How can I get out of it?
Yeah.
Oh my God, how horrible. No, this has been fantastic. So I just want people out there who also have social anxiety or something to know, me too. And here I am doing this podcast and getting up in front of my students and going to Maryland and Greater Washington and standing in front of 1 million therapists and talking about OCD. Another cliche, just do it. One of the ESL classes I teach is American English pronunciation. And one of the things I always tell the students, don't think, just say it. Because if they think what they have to do with their tongue and what they have to do with their jaw, and is it a lax sound or is it a tense sound, and then they're going to get it wrong. If they just say it, they're probably going to get it right. So the same thing, just say it, just do it.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, well, great way to end. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you for all that you do. I know that you got an award for your work, and it's well-deserved.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mark. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my conversation there with Mark. And quick disclaimer, guys, this podcast is not therapy, it's not a replacement for therapy. Please seek treatment from a trained professional. And until we speak, take care.